of Rolf's films that I saw was Bad Boy Bubby, which was the most extraordinary thing I'd ever seen. I didn't know we were allowed to make films like that.
Neither did I.
It had 32 different cinematographers, and that was not at all the most confronting thing about the film. And then from that film right through to 2006, 10 Canoes, the absolutely beautiful, stunningly original film that was the first film ever made in Australian Aboriginal languages, right through to a black comedy, which I think was your most recent release, but not your most recent film. Maybe you tell us about it. What I want to know is how he manages it. And I think talent is one reason, but the other is just this extraordinary pragmatism. I don't think Rolf has ever waited for anybody's permission to make a film or to pursue an idea. And what I really admire about what he does is that he takes what's real about the situation, the world we're living in, and finds a way to pursue his own cinematic vision, no matter what the size of his budget. Welcome, Rolf.
I'll just start with a little bit of housekeeping, as one does. I think when I was invited here, I hadn't quite settled on the theme yet, because the theme that I was given and that I prepared this talk on was not, in fact, the theme of the conference at all. So I will deal with the theme of the conference briefly in a moment. The second thing I'd like to say is that when I'm sleep deprived, my emotions lie very close to the surface. I am sleep deprived. And so if I cry, you'll know why. And thirdly, my preparations for something like this, I don't quite understand them, but I go through them. And it is a question of me being with myself and with the ideas that I wish to speak about without doing any formal preparation, but I'm with those ideas and they run through and somehow my brain organises them. However, at this symposium, I've attended sessions. I've attended sessions that have been extraordinary. And the amount of background noise in my head at the moment is such that the preparations have been very badly disrupted. And if I become incoherent, you'll know why. Okay. Starting at the beginning, like the extraordinary Guillermo Arriaga, I too was a holdout against the digital realm as such. I was one of the last people in Australia to still edit on film, and I swore I would keep shooting film as long as I could. Well, it didn't last quite as long as I'd wished, but still I railed against the notion, even as I was shooting digitally, and whole new bits of terminology were brought to my attention. So an actor would say, "Come on, let me do another take. It's only space on a memory card." And I would say, "I don't want another take, because all it will do is confuse me in the edit." Okay? The rigour that Guillermo spoke about is also something that's very dear to me, and it does disappear very largely with shooting digitally. People just, the attitude is different. That said, 2 weeks ago I was also in New Zealand, and I was converted completely to the digital realm in Wellington over a period of 4 screenings. I went to the New Zealand International Film Festival at the best cinema I have ever been to, which is the Embassy there, and I saw a film that was immaculately made, although it didn't work because the script let it down very badly. But it was the most technically perfect screening of anything I've ever seen. It was the Tornatore film. Beautifully crafted, wonderful soundtrack, beautiful images, and it was such a wonderfully immersive experience, which I knew was not possible on film. Just not possible. There was not a single glitch, not a single hair. It was perfect. Then I saw another 3 films at that same cinema. One was a documentary, Year on Ice. Another was an Australian film shot in Laos. All of the screenings were immersive and wondrous and profoundly cinematic. And I am now a digital convert. So there we go. I did, having been asked to talk about something with the theme of the conference in mind, I can't even remember what the theme was going to be. This is why this odd sort of size does matter, because that was sort of in the conference theme. What I'm going to do is talk about cinema with a capital C. Okay, what is cinema? And it's a profoundly important question for filmmakers, particularly low-budget filmmakers, because the number of films that get made is enormous, and the number of opportunities for them to be seen is much less than enormous, and therefore what do you do to give yourself any chance of succeeding in a crowded, not just marketplace, but crowded film calendar, I suppose you'd say. And I thought an interesting way to do this is to pass things by the microscope of the major film festivals. Now, I consider myself one of the luckiest and most privileged filmmakers in the world. One strives to do good work, but the measuring of what is good work depends, some people it's box office and some people it's not. But the festivals of Venice and Cannes and Berlin were always like the art house zenith of cinema. Cinema is art and circus. Circus is Hollywood tentpoles. It's Bollywood. It's Jackson Wood. That's the circus part, and it's a very fine and wonderful thing. But it takes a tremendous amount of money, and most of us don't have that opportunity. So, thinking about these festivals, that they have thousands of films submitted to them, and then they choose. And they try and choose wisely, and it is always about the art and the craft of cinema. And they care enormously about that. Now, I've had, astonishingly, a number of films, not just one. The first film that I made that got chosen for a festival, for a major festival, was Bad Boy Bubby. And it was so unexpected and so extraordinary, and here in competition at Venice were we with Bad Boy Bubby, this little film that we knew nothing about, and nor did anybody else, but also in competition at Venice was Jean-Luc Godard, which was amazing. It was Robert Altman. He was in competition at Venice, and we were with those people. So what I thought I would do is play a clip of each of the films I've done that have been picked at a major festival and try and find something about that film that is a sort of a factor that is always part of my thinking when I conceptualise. Because it's in the conceptualisation that you create cinema. Okay, yes, it's in the doing and it's everything else, but if you haven't got the concept right, you won't go there. It's a bit like when I was a judge on a short film competition, and I think there was something like 8 films that had a shot of a kettle on a stove. Okay? And I understood completely at that moment that that was not cinema. You know, unless it was extraordinary circumstance, unless the kettle was about to explode or something like that. So, what is cinema? What are these elements that, you know, something I've been thinking about ever since I began. So what we'll do is we'll start off with the first clip. Now these clips are in chronological order, meaning from the first film that got picked to the last film that got picked. There's no other reason for them being in that order. Like that. I guess the thing that can be said about, well, lots of things that can be said about it, I guess, but in this context that can be said about Bad Boy Bubby is about the ideas, okay? The bold ideas, the bold idea, the bold ideas, whatever it is. In each of these cases, there is something particular about a particular film. Doesn't mean that there aren't those other things from each other that are there, because there's something cinematic about the shot as well, and it's, you know, that's a different thing than what I'm talking about. The need to have very strong ideas that are bold, that are in some ways out there, that are in some ways confronting, I suppose, and then the need to hold on to those ideas. I was in conversation with a filmmaker here this morning, and it reminded me of that scene where when the film was finished and, you know, this was the last opportunity to make changes, and there was the sales agent came over from Italy and the co-producer came over from Italy, and we sat around and we talked about it, and the sales agent, as is their wont, you just thought it should be a bit shorter, that, you know, one of the things that should be cut was that scene, and it sort of made sense in a lot of ways, because you wouldn't miss the scene. Yes, you'd have a bit of difficulty with the setup of "fuck you God" and all that sort of stuff, but still you could cut that scene and you know, the film wouldn't be gone. But as it turned out, and as I suspected at the time, for maybe 5% of people, that's their favourite scene in the film. Okay? That's the thing that defines the film. It's one of the things, it's a scene that got one of its prizes at Venice, got the ecumenical prize. And so, if we had cut that scene, we would have robbed this film of its favourite scene for 5% of the audience. Now, there's 3 or 4 other scenes like that could easily go. And in fact, some bloke bought it on selling it to the United States, and we did a cut for him, and we did in fact cut all the warts out. He wanted all the warts gone, and we cut them out. The film ran 92 minutes instead of 100, whatever it is, and it ran like a steam train, and it was glossy and slick, and it was fantastic, but you felt nothing at the end of it, nothing. Whereas this film disturbs, it makes you feel a lot, and it's the warts, it's the ideas, it's the boldnesses that do that. And, you know, in the end, the Italian co-producer said, yes, this is what we financed, this is why we went into this, so let's leave it all in. And we did, and that was a good decision. Okay, so bold ideas, profoundly significant. Okay, the next clip is a clip from a film called The Quiet Room, which was a very low budget film, quite low budget film, particularly shot in 135. It was $590,000. We had absolutely no expectations other than to try and make a film. And there's whole stories to do with The Quiet Room that can go on forever. But astonishingly, it was selected for competition in Cannes. And there it played with some success. So we'll have a look at a clip from the choir. The significant thing about, I mean, there's numbers of significant things for me about the film, I guess, but the thing that is, in a sense, so cinematic about it, even though it's so contained, is the depth of emotional engagement that the audience has with it. Now, I did set out to try and engage the audience with it deeply emotionally, but I expected I was doing it on a different level than what in fact did happen. I thought parents would be deeply engaged with it because they have kids, and that I'm tired. That they would somehow become better parents. Now, that's not what happened. Of course, you can't change the world in that way anyway. But what did happen was people engaged with it because of their own childhoods. Okay? It brought people back to their own childhoods. And what surfaced were all the things that they had kept inside, the things that they had felt, and so people engaged with it incredibly strongly and very deeply. And it is a thing in filmmaking that I not right now, but in general, if I watch a film, I love to be moved to tears because I know I'm feeling something, I'm alive. I know that I'm feeling something for a reason that I can then think about, and I have an engaged experience with the cinema, which is what, for me, the cinema can do better than any other medium of its type. Okay, now the third clip is a bit of a problem because it's not here. I inadvertently didn't bring it, but knew there was one here. It's called Dance Me to My Song. And then when I got here, the one here couldn't be found. So I'm going to have to describe it to you. Okay? It's good that it's not here because it's another one that would probably make me cry. We don't want that. Dance Me to My Song is Heather Rose in a wheelchair, cerebral palsy, unable to talk except through a voice machine. The clip was going to show the part towards the end where the carer, who's been called the carer from hell, but I sympathise a great deal with the carer from hell because she is more damaged even than the character of Julia, who's in the wheelchair. The carer comes home, comes to Julia's place, completely angry with Julia for ruining her life, which is the way that she's got to think through the film, that is what's happened. And she physically attacks the completely defenceless Julia, drags her out of the wheelchair, crashes onto the ground, kicks her, runs the wheelchair into her. It's for me, quite something. And then, the cavalry in the form of your own Rena Owen comes and stops the proceedings. That's the clip that you've missed. Okay. It too was a very low budget film. It was $580,000. It too was this modest little work that we had no expectations for, apart from the fact that when we at one stage needed to borrow some money to complete because the Italian financiers couldn't agree as to who was going to pay the next instalment of our finishing money. When we tried to borrow some money, we were told that by a sales agent that this film would never sell to a single territory in any medium whatsoever. And then it got selected for Cannes, and of course it did. Now, the film has lived a tremendously long amount of time. and very strongly so. I still probably get more emails about it than any other film that I've done, even though it was 1997, I think, that we made it. It's in libraries, it's in hospitals, it's in teaching institutions all over the world. We give it away, we try and get it out there. The thing about it is that it's such a confronting with the unknown that it just works in a way that nothing like it, did before. There was a film released not at too dissimilar a time where an English actress played somebody with cerebral palsy in a wheelchair, and it had good people in it and it was fine. But this was Heather Rose in the wheelchair, who had devised the project, who really did have cerebral palsy, and she acted the role because I couldn't think of any other way of doing it with the budget that we had, and to make it convincing. So of course Heather Rose secretly wanted to do it, and she was talking about who should play the role, and talking very slowly, but talking about who should play the role. And I knew secretly she really would like to do it, but knew she could never do that, because that's the sort of it would never happen. And then, yes, okay, so she got the role. And so that in itself, it was a completely fictional film, but it didn't hold back at all. When I read the original script that in the end I ended up adapting into a proper movie script, what struck me was I didn't know about this stuff at all. I didn't imagine it. And here was on the page something that I thought, well, I should have imagined it. It should be possible, but it's not. And it's so difficult to deal with. It happens all the time, where carers abuse people in their care, people who are completely and utterly defenceless. And so we dealt with it openly and honestly, and that was really where Heather Rose started with it, openly and honestly, and it allowed people to see something that had been completely hidden. It was confronting for many people. There are people who can't watch it simply because it has somebody in it who can't talk and who goes like that, and they can't watch it. But a lot of people do, and a lot of people get engaged by it and get moved by it, and it opens up their universe. There was an actor's agent rang me who said, I just saw your film and didn't like it. But I have to say, I used to think people like that should be shot, but now I think next time I see one, I will try and cross the road and say hello. And I thought, that's enough. Thank you. Okay, no clip for that one. Okay. Next film. I made a film for a big budget called The Old Man Who Read Love Stories, which was exceedingly difficult film to make, and took a very long time. And at the end of it, it was a dead film for all reasons that are not part of this talk. I didn't feel like ever making another film in my life, and I thought I would stop, in fact, making films, because I thought, no, this is too hard, this is going to kill me. And then I was approached and asked, did I have anything of a certain amount? And I thought about it and I thought, yes, I do. I've got this sort of 12 pages sitting in a drawer that's been sitting there for 12 years, and might be interested in doing that. But I don't really want to, and I thought, okay, think about it. If anything is ever going to bring you back, it will be something like this, where, okay, you just say what your conditions are. You say, okay, and I did. I said, okay, yeah, I'll do it, but I'm not going to write the script until the money's in the bank, because I can't be bothered. Okay, and here it is, 12 pages. It's, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. And I had the freedom to set it up within the budget, which was 1.85. I had the freedom to set up the tracker in the to set it up and to do with it what I wished to do. And so we made the tracker. So let's have a clip of the tracker. The tracker was selected for Venice in competition, and I think as much as anything, I mean, you know, there are many reasons for it, I guess, but it had something cinematically different about it than what had come up the turnpike for them before. The songs were used in a way that's not normal. They developed as we were in post. They were originally they were designed to be songs in the film, but not like that. What I'd written for that scene was it was going to be a sort of an upbeat sort of Irish jig to play against the violence. Because I thought this whole thing is coming down so heavy, I don't want it to be that heavy, and so we'll lighten it up. Okay. So we tried that. Of course, it didn't work at all because it trivialised everything that was going on, and I didn't want it to be trivialised. And ultimately, we found that an Indigenous voice attached itself to the character of the tracker straight away, and then it meant I had to write the words to the song because they became fundamental to the narrative, and they had to play with the narrative but not describe what we were seeing. And so, you know, it became quite an important task, and so that happened to there. The paintings were planned early on when I was trying to work out how to shoot this thing for the money that we had, and it seemed like a really interesting thing to do, and in its own way that sort of works as well. And so it had, apart from emotional effect on people in different ways and all those other things, it had going for it, you know, style that's different. Now, the style by itself isn't ever enough. You look at Director Park's films, and you know they've got tremendous style, but it's tremendous style that goes to work on a particular story. But it is an element of cinema that ought to be thought about when you are conceptualising what you're going to do. Okay. The next film, I've got them out of order here. We'll have to get the right order going here. So maybe I've just written them out of order. So can we find out what the next one is? What's it meant to be? No, see, that's wrong. Next one. That's the next one. Okay. Next one is Alexander's project. Budget 1.8, whatever it was. 1.6, I think. Originally designed to be more a micro budget, like 200,000, using short ends. But in the end, it ended up being financed properly, and I was very pleased with that. It meant we could build a little set, and shoot it in a proper way. It was selected for Berlin. Whatever else might be said about the film. And there's quite a lot in there. I mean, you can think about, you know, one of the things it does is it does surprise audiences. And that's a tremendously important thing in cinema. That you know, but really, the intensity of the psychology in it is ultimately what really, I guess, makes it cinematic. It doesn't mean all cinema has to be intensely psychological, but it means the intensely psychological can make great cinema. And when I say that, I use the word intensely because much of all screen work is psychological. And if it's just ordinarily psychological, that by itself doesn't make it sufficiently interesting enough to make it cinema, where people have to pay $17 to go and see something. Okay, the next clip is 10 Canoes. There was a project that David Golpalil, the great Australian actor who was in the tracker, had been harassing me about since, not about that project, but he'd been harassing me to make a film with him and his mob on his land since we did the tracker. He didn't care what it was. First of all, he wanted to make the tracker number 2, and I said, no, I don't do sequels, and etc., etc. And on it went. And eventually, I said, okay, let's do something, and it developed into this film, which is 10 Canoes, selected for un certain regard in Cannes. Look, it's the classic journey into another world. The clip started with the black and white section of the 10 guys standing in the swamp, in their swamp canoes, and that's how the film came to me, where I'd gone up to speak to David. Okay, well, what are we going to do then? And just before I left, in the half an hour or so before I left, he plonked this photo in front of me and said, we need 10 canoes. I took one look at that photo and I thought, if we can enter that world, then this is going to be truly magical. And we did find a way to enter that world, and it was not quite the way that Winnie was expected, but it was quite magical. And it's one of the classically wonderful cinema things where you get taken on a journey in a different world, a world that you know nothing about, but that ultimately you find fascinating and interesting. Now, that's the 6, 5 clips plus 1 missing clip, and together they create a picture. They're all quite different from each other in many ways, I think. But the unifying theme is that they found to be cinema, what I call cinema with a capital C. And that happens in the conceptualisation of them, in the thinking about how you're going to deal with the subject matter. It is partly the subject matter, but not entirely, because in a way, the Quiet Room could easily have been kitchen sink drama, but ultimately it isn't. Same as Alexander's project. It's a breakdown of a relationship. It can be kitchen sink, really, but ultimately it isn't. And so there are many things that go into making up what is cinema. And it's usually a combination of some of those things that in some ways are in that film. Now, it got to the point for me with these festivals, because this now we're going to have another clip, but it's a film that was not selected for a festival. It got to the point with these major festivals that I didn't much like going to them because it's such a circus and it's such a distraction and it takes so much work and so much money that you never see back again, that it practically sends you broke to do that. At the same time, it's great for the films. But the expectation is on me that every film I do goes to a major festival. Okay? People just take it for granted. And it's an unsustainable thing. It's completely ridiculous. I've had the most extraordinary run. Every time one got picked, I'd think, another fluke, fluked it again. And so I set out to make a film that wouldn't get picked. That's true. That's what I did. And I warned everybody beforehand. Okay, this is not going to go to any major festivals. You know this, of course, because it's not like that. Now, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I did exactly to stop it from being that sort of cinema in a way. although I tried to still make it, you know, something that would play at the cinemas and that people would want to go and see. And I think I failed there, but I succeeded on the not getting picked part. In the end, there were two factors that are easily identifiable. One was, well, three factors really. One is in the end the film probably just didn't measure up in some way. That's sort of the easy one to begin with. The second one is that the critics were quite divided on it. Some people liked it quite a lot, but numbers of people, critics and audiences alike, disliked it because they felt cheated. Australia's one of the most preeminent critics is sort of encapsulated this. He said, "This is not a Rolf de Heer film." He was just very unhappy with it because it's not a Rolf de Heer film. What that is, I don't know, because, you know, look at those things, well, which one of them is. So this is called The King is Dead, and the clip I've chosen is a bit that may appeal a bit more here because there's sort of a connection. And we'll have a look at it. And you know, in some ways, it displays perhaps. Yes, and the third, just keep going. Yeah, the third factor was for me that I could easily identify is that the film has no gravitas. Now, what does that mean? In terms of the capital C cinema that we're talking about, it has no gravitas, and therefore it doesn't qualify as that sort of cinema. Now, comedy is meant to work anyway. Comedies are rarely selected for gravitas festivals. But in the end, it wasn't quite funny enough, and the humour was too different in this part of the film as being in that part of the film. But anyway, here you go. Any questions? There being no questions. Yes. That was a long time ago. No, it was, you have those overhead gantries, and there was a metal basket on chains that they could lower, like a crane thing, with they had to take generators out or a part of it. That's how they do it. So that's how we did that. Yes. Yes.
What are you working on now?
What I'm working on now, I've seen the error of my ways, and I've gone back to making a normal film for me. No, I'm doing a film. I'm in post-production on a film called Charlie's Country with David Goldwell. Yeah, it's quite a story really, but it's a sort of it's contemporary, shot in the Northern Territory. In the end, it's weirdly a sort of third part of a trilogy where 10 Canoes is how it used to be. The Trapper is what we did to them, and then Charlie's Country is these are the consequences. It's the story of Charlie, played by David. In Australia, we have a thing called the Intervention, where they sent in the troops and various things and took over Aboriginal communities in order to try and solve the social problems there. Of course, it's not a very smart way to try and solve social problems, but there's real attempt being made, but it doesn't work. But it causes a whole different way of the relationship between white culture and Aboriginal culture. And so it's a film about an Aboriginal man trying to make sense of a rapidly changing world, the Intervention. And that's really David's story in a way. It's not autobiographical, but it's it uses things of David and David's life. And it's, yeah, that's what I'm looking at. That remains to be seen. Is it a festival film? We'll see what they say. Yes.
Where did you conceal the cameras of 10 canoes?
We didn't. Okay. I learned early on in the piece that the way to shoot it was in single shots, and to sort of not even block action if you can avoid it, but just shoot. Just you might spend an hour or 2 hours setting up something, and then shoot it first time, because that's the time it's going to be best. In that time, in that first time, it all feels very real to the actors, the completely amateur actors. It feels real. And each successive time you do it, it gets worse, it just falls apart. You know, when I tried to rehearse it to begin with, it just was completely stupid. Look, it's a profoundly interesting culture, in that it's a culture that hasn't ever been conquered there. I mean, they've had wars and they've had decimations and massacres and things, but they've never been conquered, and they've always retained possession of their land. And it is, I mean, David was born in the bush when there was no town anywhere nearby, anywhere within 200 kilometres. And, you know, he's showing the tree there where he was born, he was born on this tree, and that's where my father, you know, all this sort of stuff. And the notion of fiction is not part of the culture at all. And so when not so many years ago, 10, 12, 15 years ago, when they started to get television, for example, they would think like a New York crime show was real and was happening in real time. And so the difficulty was that they didn't know what they were shooting, because you have to shoot out of sequence largely. And they would tell the story 100 times, but still there would be no real recognition of, you know, okay. There was just trust, you know, and there was trust. But specific shots we could make real. I could find a way to talk to them to make it real, and largely that would work. Sometimes they would go completely astray, like Mingalulu's the white bearded guy, and he's very traditional, and you know, we did a shot on one of those tree platforms one day, and you know, been over and over what he needed to say roughly, just not very much. And he started talking, and this was shooting on film, and you know, we had a limited budget and limited amount of film stock, of course. And he just started talking, and it should have been about 30 seconds, but after, you know, a minute he was still talking, and talking very seriously. And I thought, fuck, you know, what am I going to do now? You know, I thought, well, I'd better let him finish. 4 minutes in, he's still going. But respect, you know, because it was clearly what he was saying was really important to him. And, you know, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, just before the magazine ran out, it was 11 minutes, he finished. Okay, I then had to consult, well, what was he saying? What was he talking about? Well, he was telling the story of the part of the swamp where we were filming. That's what he thought he had to do. And that's got a big story attached to it, and you know, that's what he was doing. Because that was, for him, that was what was real, and that was what he thought was expected. So we didn't hide cameras, because first take was fine, usually. We didn't need to hide the cameras, because they would just do what we'd worked out, usually with total commitment. Bobby, one of the 10 canoeists, he used to describe that every time he went onto the swamp with a canoe, he didn't talk about feeling like one of his ancestors. He became one of his ancestors, a particular one. And The ongoing work with the community. Yeah, it goes on. Much of Charlie's Country was shot at this community because it was David's community. David left just before we shot 10 Canoes because of trouble with the community, and at least is partly reconciled with the community now because of Charlie's Country. We did as part of the 10 Canoes project, we did a number of other projects, including one that we call 12 Canoes, and there's a truly wonderful website called 12canoes.com.au, which is about the community. There are 10 sort of stories, and then there's all sorts of art and stuff like that. 10 sort of stories of culture and history and language and things describing the community, which at one stage were joined together and they've played festivals all over the world as a piece that's been joined together. And now, like 5 years later, 6 years later, I think, it's starting to go on the archaeological film festival circuit, and it wins all these prizes and the prize money that we share with the community through credit. With Charlie's Country, it's a similar sort of thing. There's a web project as part of it. There's a documentary which is sort of related to the film in the sense that the film deals with contemporary issues. So does the documentary, but it's not about the film at all. It doesn't deal with the filmmaking at all, because there's an ongoing desire by the community to deal with this stuff and to get the stories out there. One of the extraordinary things on shooting Charlie's Country, that there was certain that Mingalulu, the old traditionalist who spoke for a long time on the tree platform, he ended up coming to every day of filming, and he can't speak English. He can understand a little bit of English, but he can't speak it. And he became part of the sound recordist's tent, the cover, and he would listen to every take and either give his approval or not, as the case may be. But in particular, the takes that were about the politics of the intervention were very important to him. So the dialogue, had to be for him absolutely precise, and he would only say, "Yep, this is number one." He would say number one, meaning that's okay, you can have that one. Because Charlie steals a police car at one point, but in his own mind he just borrows it, and he explains why. This is what they've done. They've taken your gun, they've taken my gun, they've confiscated your car, they've destroyed my spear, they've taken our land and put their police station on it, and I'm only borrowing their car. That whole string of words needed to be completely precise. I don't know quite answering your question, but it doesn't matter. That whole string of words had to be completely precise for Mingalulu because it was the most important line in the film. They've taken our land and put a police station on it. I don't know how long I can sustain it. I'm going to have to withdraw from really close involvement because it's getting too complex. It's getting too complex with money, getting too complex with responsibilities, with a desire for me to intervene in their lives, to run their bank accounts, so they can take any sense in money, and all of that sort of stuff. But we'll finish this and see where we end up. These projects, plural. Down the back first.
It's a bit of a big one, but you're talking about conceptualising. How do those things come to you, and then how do you approach them?
How do those things come to me in the conceptualisation of it? Well, it starts off very small. I mean, with 10 Canoes, it was okay, David, we'll do a film. I had thought about films with Indigenous content that were being made in Australia at the time, and there'd been this sort of wonderful time when there were one after another, including a couple by Aboriginal directors, and then suddenly everything had stopped. You know, there was nothing. And then I thought, okay, well, where would you go next? What would you do next? And I thought, I know what you would do next. You would go up to David's Land and you would shoot a film with David co-directing, and it would all be in language. That's what you would do. I said, I'm not going to do it because, you know, it's too hard. But in the end, yes, I did. It went. And after 4 days, the only thing we knew is that it was going to be some Aboriginal story. We didn't know what it was. A sort of a love story, probably, that was going to finish, we'd get to a certain point, and then suddenly the white men would come and kill everybody. Okay, would interrupt the story just before the climax, so you could never find out what actually happened. And that's what we were going to do. But then, you know, David came with the photo and said, okay, you know, we need 10 canoes. Why do we need 10 canoes? Well, this is why we need 10 canoes. And I look at that photo and I think, yes, okay, it's cinema. In some ways, it is so cinema that we're going to be okay. Okay, now just a question of holding on to that and time. That's that one. Okay, Quiet Room, completely different. Okay, had completely different reasons for making the film. It was a contrived, constructed film in a way, where I had to make a film in a hurry. I had to be able to finance it in a hurry, and I had to make it in a studio for all complex reasons to do with other stuff. Okay, and it had to be very low budget for me to be able to raise the money quickly enough, because I needed to raise it very quickly. And so it became what it became, and the big issue with that was, okay, how do we keep it cinematic? We had money for 2 rooms only, and so what rooms do we choose? And normally we use the kitchen, dining area because a lot of stuff happens there, or the living room. Okay, none of that appealed to me as being cinematic, and in the end it was the little girl's room and the parents' bedroom. They were the only 2 rooms in the house that you saw. Because somehow you could control the cinema of it. And with that one, because I was very worried about its possible slide into kitchen sink drama, I was very lucky that very early on I discovered a statement that somebody had said, a quote, I discovered a quote in a magazine, and it said, "In the Greek tragedies, no one ever knew what the gods had for breakfast." Okay? And I wrote that down on a card because I thought it was fantastic. Okay? And I stuck it up in front of me where I was writing, and I referred everything to that. Everything. Okay? Is this? You know? Is this? Okay? And that's a sort of conceptual thing, and that's sort of what I try to do with the clips. Okay? I can't tell you what cinema is, but cinema is in the Greek tragedies, which were the cinema of yesteryear. In the Greek tragedies, nobody ever knew what the gods had for breakfast. That's cinema. Okay? And some of that is cinema. And so it's a question of trying to think like that. In the scripting of Bad Boy Bubby, I actually had a card because I was grappling with the notion of what is cinema. And I had a card and it said, "Is this cinema?" Okay? And that card went with every card for every scene that I wrote in that film. And I tested every scene against that. Is it cinema? And if it wasn't, out it went. And now, I can't tell you exactly why something is not and something is. But if you look at those films in a way, and you put it all together, you think, yes, I have some sense. And all the great films that you've seen, and the great films that are still being made in the 70s in America, and, you know, European, okay, all the great films. Somehow together they all answer the question. Yes.
Um,
Oh, yes. No, wait. Him. Sorry.
I've
Yeah.
always wondered how Bad Boy Bubby came to be. I guess it's Genesis.
It's Genesis.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, no,
That's
that's
a
a long
very large question, isn't it?
There's a long story. Yes. Okay. Very simply, I had a friend who I was working with. I had made no films. I had a friend I was working with who bizarre things happened to him in his life all the time. Okay? He created these situations, not intentionally, where So we were writing a comedy together, which was based on these two incredible things that had happened to him. It was like a French farce. Okay. Then he said, look, nobody's ever going to let me be in this film. I said, well, maybe not. And he said, well, look, I better go to NIDA. I said, yeah, well, okay, but you better go to NIDA, which is the National Institute of Dramatic Art. And so he applied, and I coached him, and he got in. And in second year, this is how a film starts, you know. In second year, he did a Sam Shepard play called Buried Child, and he was Dodge. And Dodge is on stage from the beginning to end. Dodge is 70 years old. Friends of mine came, and we watched the thing, and they said to me at half-time, where's Richie? You said he was in this. I said, yes, he's Dodge. He's on stage the whole time. And they couldn't believe it. It was a transformative performance. It was extraordinary. He was fantastic. Okay. Then we decided, you know, then another year or so went by, and he got out of NIDA, and I didn't have anything to do, and he didn't have anything to do, and we said, okay, well, let's make a film. Okay. And we started off talking about basing it on his transformation into an old man. Now, he then did a short film with somebody, a little short film, where they made him into an old man. It didn't work at all, okay? Because this is cinema, you know, and he's 30 and he can't play 70. It doesn't work, okay? And that's where the idea in the film comes from of him being like Pop, okay? So he can't play a character like Pop, so he pretends to be a character like Pop. This is just where that idea came from. And so we began to think about making a film, and I sort of, you know, said, like this and whatever, and this and that. We talked about it for a day or so, and even a couple of weeks, over a period of a couple of weeks. And we had some basic ideas, that was all. And then things happened in lives, and he went one way and I went another way, still a great friend. But he stopped working on it, and I began to work on it over a period of time, thinking that it was going to be shot at weekends because nobody's ever got a funding to make a film. Okay, so how do I do this? I have to get a job, earn enough money to buy a roll of film, go and shoot a scene, earn enough money to process it, go and earn enough money to buy another roll of film, go and shoot the following weekend. That's what I was going to do, and this is where the 32 different cinematographers came from. Okay, because I thought there's no way that I'm going to be able to, it's going to take 2 years to do. There's no way that I'm going to be able to have the same cinematographer. Well, this is a catastrophe, which is why I locked Bubby up. Okay.
Got any more questions? I think on that